Hello, and welcome to the September 20th, 2022 program sponsored by the League of Women Voters of the Grand Traverse area and hosted by Traverse Area District Library and Traverse Area Community Media. Our topic today is everything you ever wanted to know about voting but were afraid to ask. And we should note that today is National Voter Registration Day, and the League actually has a registration booth set up at Northwest Michigan College, and we hope you all will learn today a lot about voter registration. I also would like to remind you to please turn off or mute your cell phones if you have them with you. I'm League member Cheryl Naparella, your moderator for today's program. Ann Magoon will be facilitating the questions, and members of the League of Women Voters Program Committee will assist. The League of Women Voters is a national nonpartisan organization. The League does not endorse or oppose candidates or political parties, but does work to obtain and distribute information to the public about candidates and their views. The League promotes the informed and active participation of all citizens in government. It works to increase the understanding of major public policy issues through education and advocacy. Membership in the League is open to women and men of all ages, and we offer a special discount to students. Our program today is being shown on Spectrum Cable Channel 189 in Northwest Michigan, Lower Michigan, on the Traverse Area Community Media Facebook page, on the League of Women Voters Facebook page, and also here in person. Today we welcome our guests Sam Gedman, Ted Arnold, and Jane Hayes. Sam is the Chief Deputy County Clerk of Grand Traverse County. He holds multiple graduate degrees, including a Master of Public Education, Public Administration, and a PhD in Political Science. He has administered elections in several states, those of Michigan, Mississippi, North Carolina, and Tennessee. Ted Arnold is a senior at Central High School, and he's interested in political science and history. He is the student liaison to the Traverse City Planning Commission, and this past summer he worked in the Antrim County Clerk's office. Ted is applying to college this year, and he wants to know how he can vote once he gets there. Jane Hayes is a member of the League of Women Voters Grand Traverse Area and many other community organizations. She's a retired associate professor from the School of Social Work, Grand Valley State, and she has been a past president of the Traverse City School Board and the Great Lakes Community Mental Health Board. Jane will be asking questions about the security of voting. Thank you all for helping with the program today, and thank you to our audience for attending. And now I'm going to turn the program over to Ann Magoon, who is going to facilitate the questions and answers.
Thank you, Cheryl. I'm so glad to see you here today, and I want you to understand that you do have an opportunity to participate in this. After Ted and Jane ask their questions and Sam responds to them, you can have your questions addressed. We're trying not to overlap, so we will have somebody screen for questions that have already been asked and look for legibility and relevance. But on your chair, you should have a pen or a pencil and a 3x5 card that you can use for submitting your own question. And Lauren, who's right here in the front, will come around and pick up your questions. I guess we're not going to ask that one. And take them, vet them, and then we will ask those of Sam as time allows. Okay, so be sure you get your questions on paper for us. Okay, Sam, you're all set? Ready to go?
I'm here and ready.
Okay.
Fire away.
Ted, are you ready for your first question?
I'm ready. So, I've never voted before. I'm only 17.
Okay.
Where and how do I register to vote?
Well, there's a few options for that. You have to be 17 and a half in Michigan and 18 by election day in order to go ahead and vote. You are able to pre-register after 17 and a half if you'll be 18 on election day. You can go to your local clerk's office, meaning your township or your city clerk, depending on where you live. You can go to the county clerk's office and fill out a voter registration application. You can download the application, fill it out, and mail it in to either of those places, or you can do it online through the Secretary of State's website. when you do it online, you do have a verification that's going to be required of you when you go to vote for the first time. But if you bring it in and you have ID and proof of residency, you can be registered without any of those little flags showing up on election day. But otherwise, you'll have to show up, if you do it online, you'll have to show up on election day with some sort of residency verification.
How soon before an election do I need to register to vote?
Well, that's up to you. That's a personal decision, I guess. The best way to avoid any sort of issue is there's that 2-week window. You want to be involved, get there and register to vote. That way you can vote in person. But you can register in the state of Michigan up to election day. When you do, within that last 2 weeks prior to the election, though, you will have to register at the clerk's office in person, provide residency verification, and then vote an absentee ballot because you under the statutory deadline for registration. But that is a provision in Michigan law that's sort of an exception that was Proposal 3 in 2018 allows you to do that now. So we have same-day registration in Michigan. It just looks a little bit different than regular voter registration.
So what happens when I go to vote in person at my precinct? Like, what does the process look like for voting?
Yeah, the process for most people who are properly registered and have a valid form of photo ID is really straightforward and simple. You walk in there, you fill out a short form, an authorization to vote, basically, which is sort of like an application. You take that up to an election inspector who's working at an e-poll book station. They look up the information. They make sure that you're properly registered at your address. They verify your photo ID. Then you move over a step. You get a ballot, get some brief instructions. You go into a secure area and vote your secret ballot. Take that and put that yourself into the tabulator and get a sticker and go home and start, feel good about yourself because you cast a ballot. There are a few, different things that come up over the course of that. There are some, I'm sure you'll get to those later, but 99% of the cases, that's what it entails.
So what happens if I don't have my ID with me when I go to vote at my precinct?
Well, you can fill out an affidavit right now by law, basically saying, I have an ID, but I didn't bring it with me. And then you're able to vote a regular ballot just by signing that affirmation.
So I'm in the process of applying to colleges right now, and I'm looking at some in-state and some out-of-state. So if I go to a school out of state, but I'm still registered to vote in Traverse City, where do I vote? How can I vote? How does that work?
Yeah, so you're protected under law. Basically, you vote where you live as a general operating principle. For a student who's on a residential campus somewhere else, you're able to register and stay registered at your previous address, your parents' address, even if you're not there for most of the year. And it's basically you would vote an absentee ballot. There's an absentee application. You'd submit that to your township clerk or your city clerk. You get that absentee ballot mailed to you, and you'd have to return that within the statutory period by election day. That's a right that you have. It is unfortunate sometimes people get a little bit overzealous and they want to register to vote where they go to college, which can be problematic for a lot of reasons, right? Especially if you get federal student aid or things like that. Your car insurance might be at your parents' house, and then you don't realize that you've changed your legal address, right? Your car registration, your insurance, your FAFSA, those types of things. So it's something that college students should really think long and hard about. Get that absentee ballot and make a point of doing that.
So if I go to school in state, like if I went to Michigan or Michigan State, would the process change at all from that, or would it be?
I'd recommend you go to Western, first of all. But no, it's a little. You still have the same legal rights to do that. You have the opportunity to vote that absentee ballot, and that is something you don't forfeit no matter where you go to school. It's just again, if you get caught up in all those voter registration drives, somebody puts something in front of you and says, you want to register to vote, that kind of thing. If you fill out a voter registration application with your college address, with your dorm or your apartment, that's going to change that. And, under the motor voter law, that's going to go back to the Secretary of State's office. They're going to think you changed your address, which could complicate things for you. So it's just something to be aware of. College students should certainly be aware that there's more to registering to vote. You're making a legal declaration of your address. So if you're going to vote from home, I would, vote in your home address here in Traverse City or Grand Traverse County. Make sure, I would recommend being aware of what it entails if they've ever changed that.
So if I vote absentee from my college campus, how long in advance should I mail my ballot in? I mean, how long is that going to take?
This is problematic for me because I don't want to bury the post office, right? Because they work very hard. But you are putting yourself in a position where you're counting on the U.S. mail to be delivered. They do a fantastic job. They're very efficient. But you don't want to leave too much to chance. You know, you don't want to sit there and then mail it back on Saturday, because in Michigan, for a Tuesday election, in Michigan, postmarked ballots don't matter. You know, in some states, as long as it's postmarked by Election Day, they can go back in and add it to the vote totals at the end of an election. In Michigan, it's got to be in the clerk's hand 8 o'clock on Election Day, and if it's not, it's not going to be tallied. So you want to allow plenty of time for that. You know, statutorily, we're going to get the ballots out a month, a little more than a month ahead of time, so you'll have that period of time to make that decision, and it's better to be efficient with it, just so you don't have to leave it to chance.
So if I go to college and end up changing my place of residence and I register to vote there, but I still have a Michigan driver's license, or I still get things delivered to my Michigan address, what kind of problems does that cause? Can I switch my registration back to Michigan?
So it creates a bit of an issue, right? So there's, it depends on states, right? So depending on where you are, what state you go to, they are going to, some states will give you the option to automatically register to vote. Some states communicate back directly with Michigan, so your voter registration would be canceled. Based on the motor voter law, if you register to vote in another state, you become a legal resident of that state, and then your federal student aid would be, your application could be incorrect, right? You might run into problems in that area. Your car registration, those types of issues can arise, and it varies state to state. So, the Michigan Secretary of State has data that they'll communicate with some 30 states, but there's some that they just don't. And it really varies. So it's something you have to be aware of when you move. And of course, it's illegal to vote twice in a federal election, right, for the same office. So, that's something that happens in presidential primaries sometimes. People be going to college in North Carolina, primaries 2 months after, and they'll try to vote in the same primary. And that can be something you expose yourself to that you would be unwitting, but you still don't want to do it. So you have to kind of understand the state laws where you move. I guess that's the best recommendation I could give you.
So lastly, where can I find good, up-to-date information about the voting process here or anywhere else, and candidates in the elections that I might be voting?
Yeah, there's, if you want very dry information, we try to maintain some on our website. And of course, the Michigan Voter Information Center, maintained by the Secretary of State, is a very good resource for folks. I know the 411 that the League of Women Voters puts together has got more substantive information on candidates. You're not going to find too many government organizations like ours or the Secretary of State that'll give you anything on a candidate besides their name or their address or those type of things, because it's problematic for any governmental organization to try to summarize a candidate or to provide any kind of a voter guide. So we have to rely on good nonpartisan groups like the League of Women Voters and others to do those types of things. But yeah, the Michigan Voter Information Center, SOS, michigan/sos.gov, MVIC, is a really great resource that'll give you your sample ballot will be linked there, Dropbox locations, your clerk's hours, those types of things. So you can find a lot of resources, a lot of information, a lot of answers to frequently asked questions, but you're not going to find much on candidates or proposals outside of just the language.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Best of luck to you.
Thank you, Ted. Those were all good questions, and Sam, those were great answers. A lot of information there, and we're just
There's a lot of information on this subject. Yeah, there's volumes on it. So
thank you. Jane?
Thank you, Sam, for being here. My questions are surrounding the whole issue of security and safety in voting. We've heard a lot about voter fraud over the last years. So my first question has to do with what is the job of a poll watcher, and how are people selected and trained for that?
Well, that can vary a little bit depending on the quality of training that folks receive. But poll watchers generally are just observers. They don't have any legal right to do anything more than walk into a polling place and observe as any member of the public would. They don't have to be credentialed and they don't have to be trained. If they're disruptive, they're asked to leave. Poll challengers, on the other hand, are appointed by the political parties or any qualifying organization that requests to send poll challengers into the county clerk's office prior to the election. So we can have third-party groups that'll appoint challengers as well as the political parties. And these folks should have some kind of a training, and they are able to view poll books. They're not able to delay the voting process or question voters, but they are able to review materials and be in the non-public areas of a polling place. So we have those, usually it's the Democrats and the Republicans, and we'll see, we had in Grand Traverse County in August something called the Election Integrity Force was credentialed challengers, and I believe they're going to be around again in November. So we do have seen, National Right to Life or the ACLU or groups like that will submit a letter to the clerk's office and say, we'd like to appoint challengers this election, and as long as their paperwork's in order, we let them do that. And as of right now, there's no real training that comes from us for that. It comes to them. So it's really falls on the election inspectors themselves to understand what a challenger can and can't do and when they're overstepping their bounds or when they might be disruptive to the process.
So there can be poll watchers at a site, and there can be poll challengers there too.
Yeah, and I think that was, if you recall, there was some controversy around what was happening at the TCF Center in Detroit in 2020 when they said that people were being ejected, and I think a lot of that was confusion over who was a poll watcher and who was a poll challenger, who could be here and who couldn't. Well, they're throwing people out, they're not showing us what they need to show us, and in some cases, those people were not credentialed challengers. They were just poll watchers, and they had to remain in the public area. So there can be some confusion on that topic, especially amongst the people themselves if they're not well trained by their organization or by the party.
Okay. Just one more question. As far as a poll challenger, could you give an example of what a poll challenger would challenge in a voting site?
Yeah, certainly they could challenge the person's registration status or their residency, right? They could say, somebody could show up and say, here's my form. My name's Sam Gedman. I'm, and it's got my address on it. And they could say, no, that's my house. He doesn't live here. And they could say, I'd like to challenge this voter's, residency, and I'd have to sign an affidavit basically affirming where I live.
Do we have poll watchers and challengers when absentee ballots are being counted?
Yeah, we do. They're allowed to be there for that process. It's a little different in the absentee counting boards. You have to be sequestered in the absentee counting boards without your phone. So when you're there for the duration until the absentee counting board adjourns, basically. So they want it, once those ballots are kind of out, there can't be any report of any tabulation or anything like that. So they sequester you in there until the end of the evening, until that whole thing is reconciled. So that's a little bit of a tough draw for a challenger, being stuck in that room for 8, 9, 10, however many hours it is.
Could you speak to the security surrounding the tabulators, the ballot boxes that we use?
Yeah, I mean, very generally, in Michigan, of course, we're a decentralized state. So, in some states, the county runs the election. In some states, the township and the cities and the local jurisdictions do. So there are, tabulators at Mayfield Township, the city of Traverse City, and all over. But for the most part, they're kept under lock and key prior to Election Day. And one of the things that we use to verify their security is every compartment that could be opened has a security seal on it that has to be verified with a serial number, and they're tamper evidence seals. So those get recorded, and they have to be verified before anything is turned on or used. So we'll provide, once the election media is provided and the tabulator becomes functional, that flash drive that was put into those devices with all the memory and all of the election definitions on it is put down. There's a security seal over top of it with a number. That number is recorded, and if there's a breach on that, we would know it. And if it came back with a different seal on it, we would know that too. So everything is, the physical security is very good. These things are sort of self-locking within themselves. The only thing of really value in them is the flash drive, and that's kept in a separate locked compartment. The clerk should be the only ones with the keys, the clerk and the deputy clerk. It's got a security seal on it that was verified, usually in a bipartisan fashion, if at all possible. Of course, some smaller jurisdictions, that's not always possible. But for the most part, the physical security of the machines themselves is pretty good, just by the nature of how they're constructed and, of course, by where they're kept. The cybersecurity is great because they're not online. They don't have any modems on them. There's no way to really, and they don't really have anything of value in them. They're pretty much blank slates until you put the election definitions in them, which are is portable media contained on a flash drive. So as far as secure systems go, we have about as good as you can have in Michigan for the amount of verifying that we do at a human level, for the amount of people that, no one's really alone with these machines. There's not much you can do with them, even if you were alone with them, without the election definitions, and they're kept up pretty secure, safe, sealed. And I think it's about as good a system as you can have for physical security. And I know at the county we take it really seriously. We have machines, and there's only 2 people with access to the keys, and those keys are locked up. And they're downstairs pretty well secured. Rarely see the light of day until it's time for routine maintenance and that kind of thing. So we do take it very seriously, all manner of physical security.
How about the security around absentee ballots?
Yeah, and again, the quality of that's going to depend a lot on local jurisdictions. Now, I know there's best practices, and especially in Grand Traverse County, we have a lot of very good clerks that take that stuff very seriously. So again, you don't want to be in a position where you're leaving those out, right, doing that sort of absentee work in a public space and leaving ballots out on a desk and going to lunch. So they're kept in locked rooms. They're kept secure and separate from the general area where people do work in an office. People have to be signed in to have access to those, and no ballot is removed until the absentee counting board convenes. So it's basically the job of the clerk and the deputy clerk to keep those organized, to make sure that those are being entered in properly, so that on election day, all the if you submitted and returned an absentee ballot, you can go online and look and see that it was received. And then if you show up to vote on election day, they'll say, wait a minute, we have an absentee ballot with your name on it upstairs. So that all that work gets done in a very secure way. And then once the absentee counting board convenes, it's done in a bipartisan fashion. There's always members of both parties who are involved when those ballots start to be opened up. And that's under general public observation if they choose to. There can be watchers and challengers. They just have to be sequestered. So those ballots are kept secure until that time, and then they're treated pretty great reverence during the absentee counting process.
All right, thank you, Sam.
Yeah, of course.
I think we as voters can have a lot of confidence that our vote does count, so thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jane. Great questions. And we have some more from the audience, and you can still send them along if you wish. Just complete your card and hold it up. Somebody will pick it up. What is the process to become a poll worker? And that includes any qualifications and time commitment.
Yeah, the qualifications by statute are fairly minimal. You just have to be a registered voter in good standing in the community. But there is a training requirement. Folks have to go through a training that the county clerk will put on for smaller jurisdictions, but that larger jurisdictions, charter townships and cities of a certain size will do their own training. But there's a statutory requirement that you go through. I believe it's 3 to 4 hours of training prior to the election every 2 years. And that usually includes working on the e-poll book and ballot security measures, some basic overview of the law. And once you've gone through that, it's just like any other job, getting hired, getting trained, making sure that we have people with both party preferences in a polling location. Some places down county, they're short of Democrats always, and they're looking for folks from the city to come down and help out. And sometimes in the city, they can't find any Republicans, and they'll ask people from down county. So there's a good working relationship between local clerks to try to make sure we've got people where they need to be, and rewarding expertise, people who've done this for years and years and know how to operate those e-poll books and know all the inner workings of things to make sure that they're welcome back and excited to come back. So it's, it's just kind of when there's a need, they usually post it, and there's always a need. And then it's just a question of getting folks trained. You know, one of the unfortunate things is all the administrative work before an election seems to come at once. You know, right when you've done, people start taking an interest right around this time, you know, right after Labor Day, they start to think, but we've had to have our training done before the August primary because we've run out of time. We're programming ballots and reconciling elections, testing machines, and that kind of thing. So I'd be, you know, just would ask anyone who's interested in that to let it be known early on, because I think we have one more training coming up, and, you know, we have to have all this stuff done well before most people even start thinking about it.
And you said a poll worker should be a registered voter in the community. Does that mean in the same township or city or county?
No, they're allowed to move about. You know, in fact, it's, you know, almost desirable in some instances because you can't work anywhere where you have an immediate family member who's, you know, on the ballot. So sometimes, you know, that can force people to move around and do various different things. So, but you have to be a registered voter in good standing, and that's, you know, after that, there's a fair amount of horse trading that goes on, I would say.
Now, this is about a challenged vote.
Okay.
And it's really a challenged voter, I believe. If a vote is challenged, when, where, and how will the challenge be resolved?
It's a very short process. It has to be resolved in the polling place. So it's basically, you know, a brief Q&A with the person, just asking them to verify the information that was challenged. And it's a self-attestment for the most part. Is that really where you live? Yes, it is. No, it's not. You know, and that's really the extent of the challenge. You see, there's also the ability to challenge absentee ballots as well.
That's the next question.
And that is a little bit different in that, you know, the burden is always on the challenger. You know, do you have some evidence that you can present aside from your own attestment? And if they don't, there's really no way for that challenge. You know, that was my brother-in-law and he's dead kind of a thing, and here's his obituary. That's different than, you know, I know that guy. I think he lives in Florida, you know, most of the year. That's not really something that can be verified.
Okay, thank you. And now more about absentee ballots. How can my grandson get an absentee ballot when he is in another state temporarily? Can he do it online? And I'll add to that, if for some reason he can't do it online, how does he get it otherwise?
Yeah, I guess the best course of action is always to contact the local clerk. You know, the application is the application. You can get the application online, submit it electronically, but you'd also, you know, it takes it a minute. The local clerk's going to be the one to issue the ballot. So if you can just avoid another step, another relaying of information, any potential confusion that might occur, the best course of action is always speak to that local clerk, right? So, you know, Michigan is an interesting state. You know, a lot of states don't have townships, right? You are a resident of a county or a city. But in Michigan, everybody's either a resident of a township or a city or a village or, you know, some local area. So you call your township or your city clerk, and they would be happy to take that application. You can submit it and send it right to them, and that's usually the best way. And then you go back online to the Michigan Voter Information Center, and you can check to make sure that absentee ballot application was accepted and that you're on the absentee list. So I would say the best course of action is always to follow up with that local jurisdiction, just to avoid any entanglements, not to disparage any other unit of government, but, you know, if you give it to me, I'm going to give it to them anyway. If you give it to the state, you know, same sort of thing. So just why don't you give it where it's going? And that's be the quickest and most efficient way to do it.
So to the local jurisdiction. And all absentee ballots are a two-step process. The application, even if you go in person to fill it out, application has to be filled out before you do an absentee ballot. Is that correct?
Yes, you have to apply for an absentee ballot separately.
Okay, so allow
With your own,
time
under
for
your own
that.
hand. With your own signature, I guess is a less cryptic way of saying that, but yes.
If I have a disability that keeps me from filling out a ballot or writing, how do I vote?
Well, if you're voting in person, we do have an accessible device that allows for people to vote, you know, who might have an impediment, you know, vision or hearing or fine motor impediments. Those are available in every precinct in the state. Here we call those the Express Vote. It's a touch screen. or you can use a straw. There's a braille element to it, and those types of things. You're also welcome to have somebody assist you. So you're allowed to have someone assist you as long as they're not your employer or an agent of your labor union. If you'd like that, the person who is assisting you has to sign and print their name on the return envelope. I actually brought a return envelope because I anticipated this question. There's a little thing for the person who's assisting just down here on this purple return envelope that comes with the absentee ballot, and they'd just be asked to sign that. And then they're able to help you mark your ballot. They're not, by law, able to influence you. You can't have a situation where you have a whole bunch of people, like an event, where there's sort of a mass assisting. One person can assist one voter, but it's perfectly lawful for someone to assist a voter, to read to them, to help them mark their ballot, if that's something that they require.
So, and the next question is very similar. How much can I help my 89-year-old mother to vote?
Yeah, I think, it comes down to personal ethics in some respects, because it's very difficult to enforce some of the statutory language on the books. But, to the extent you can say, what would you like me to mark here, as opposed to, you really want me to vote? You don't want to vote for this guy. No, right? You want to avoid those kinds of situations, and you want to avoid a thing where you give me these, you ladies, I'll take all your ballots here and I'll just mark them for you, because I know that's a real pain. You don't want to do that. That's certainly would be a violation of the law and an ethical violation as well. So you can help mark the ballot for somebody who has that kind of, might have that kind of an issue, but you're not able to, it's a felony to mark it for them, I guess, against their wishes. So you want to be careful in that regard.
Now, related to having people assist, who can assist in delivering or handling an absentee ballot?
Yeah, so if you're going to bring it back to the clerk's office or the drop box, it has to be a member of your immediate family or someone who lives in your household, or the mailman. But yeah, it can't be an organization. So somebody couldn't say, I'm here to, I'm doing an absentee ballot drive. Do you have your absentee ballot? I'll take it in for you. That's not lawful in Michigan. It's not true of every state, but it is true in Michigan. So I know there were some fairly well-viewed documentaries or quasi-documentaries out there alleging, ballot harvesting and things. And one thing you have to remember is, depending on which footage you're kind of looking at in those regards, some things are legal in some states and some are legal in other states. It's in Georgia, for instance, it's not against the law for someone to bring back ballots that are not from their immediate family. In Michigan, it is. So, if you're from another state, you can't take those kinds of things for granted, But basically, anybody who's a member of your household or immediate family is welcome to provide that service, and bring that absentee ballot back, drop it off for the clerk, or put it in one of those verified and official drop boxes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How are students introduced to voting in the Grand Traverse County? In other words, do students have a program by local election officials about how to vote? Do they have hands-on experience with the voting process, I guess, with ballots and a tabulator? Is there anything like that in?
Well, it's kind of a difficult thing right now because we're in this new post-COVID world. There were some outreach programs and things that we were doing prior to 2020, and a lot of that is got to get restarted. That's an engagement that we'd certainly love to be a part of, to help students and those kinds of things. And I know, it's always difficult. Sometimes when you're just turning 18, there's a big election coming up and it's in the front of everybody's mind, and sometimes it's an off year and it's not. So if we get invited, we're happy to show up and happy to help and work with any of our partners in the TCAPs or surrounding schools to help facilitate that. We'd love to.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
When, if ever, will voters be able to vote online versus in person or absentee?
Well, now you're asking me to make predictions, but that's a very challenging thing because it would contradict several existing laws. Now there is a state proposal now, sort of talks about 9 days of early voting and how that'll be facilitated, I don't know. You know, that'll have to be an administrative interpretation. But, you know, some states in Michigan might be going this direction, might have in-person early voting, and that's almost always an online process in some regard, that the ballot, once it's cast, you know, the voter history is transmitted so that the person can't come in the next day and do the same thing, and that really has to be online. Right now, everything we do is offline, so once the poll books close, you know, we have to be able to create a record onto an e-poll book by 4 o'clock the Monday prior to an election, so that everything can be offline on that Tuesday. You know, for us to make that change would require different statutory fixes at the state level. But I mean, I think certainly the technology exists. The demand is, well, it was there. I don't know if it's a universal demand any longer, but we've actually had groups come up to us and advocating for going back to hand tallying everything. And I'm like, yeah, somebody else going to have to do that, because I'm not, we don't have time for that kind of thing. But, you know, when the public will is there, we can change it. But until then, it's going to be, it's hard to foresee that day right now, given the existing political environment and the statutory hoops that would need to get jumped through to make that happen.
But currently now, every vote, am I correct, every vote in Michigan has a physical paper ballot attached to it?
Yes.
Always. And
Yeah.
if we did it online, that would totally change that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would think it would have to, right? Yeah, it would be. I mean, if you, again, states are different. You know, there's states out west that do almost all elections by mail. You know, Washington State, for instance, they're mailing ballots to everybody and doing everything by mail, and that's been successful for them. Michigan's a very decentralized state with a lot of home rule and a lot of home rule traditions that really make that kind of a thing hard to envision. But, you know, all it takes is somebody to pilot it and make it successful, and who knows what could happen. I know Alaska does, you know, they're doing they just had a Senate race or a congressional race where they were experimenting with ranked choice. Thank you. I couldn't come up with the word, but, you know, and that's, right now Michigan doesn't have anybody doing that, although it's being looked at. I think there's a jurisdiction downstate that was looking at doing something similar. And once momentum goes, laws can change. But, you know, until that kind of shoulder to the wheel from the people who are advocating for it, I don't see that happening in my lifetime. But.
Right. Election sites sound secure, but what checks and balances are there to keep elected voting officials honest?
Well, yeah, it's a great question, because basically everything we do is unnecessarily complicated if you look at it from, you know, the outside in. You're like, why does it take, you know, like it took me a week and a half to program the ballot. You know, I used to program tests that would take me, you know, 2 hours, right, with a Scantron machine and a Microsoft Word document. But, you know, we have multiple levels of redundancy to the point of great frustration sometimes. No one person is ever empowered to be alone with equipment to make changes, to do things that would be unsupervised or unverifiable. So we have, you know, it annoys some of the people on our staff. We have all this chain of custody, right? So if you're going to turn on the elections computer, you need to sign in with a unique login, because it's not connected to the internet, you know. So that's going to be, we're going to keep an electronic log of everybody who does that. Our flash drives that we use to write election media are kept under a secured seal in a separate room, and if you want to break that seal, you're going to have to sign that and do it in the presence of 2 people. You know, so every time we move any physical record, or any time we, you know, write election media, we treat it as a very sacred commodity that is going to be, you know, from the moment it exists, we're going to know who's had access to it and when. So that's a very important thing for us. And then as you go through the process, all that is sort of enshrined into law. So when we get, you know, paperwork back at night on election night, we're going to have everything signed by every precinct inspector that they saw. They'll turn on the voting machine in the morning, the tabulator, and they're going to run a tape that shows all the results being 0. So, and they all have to sign that 0 tape showing that no votes have been cast. Then at the end of the night, when they have tallied their votes and the polls have closed, they run that tape again with the results on it, and they all sign off on that, verifying it. They verify the electronic poll book. They send all kinds of reports at the end of the evening. Those get put in sealed bags. Those bags have security seals on them. They get brought to us, and they're only open in the presence of a probate judge and the county clerk, and it's a public process. So we have the physical security we take very seriously. Cybersecurity as well. We keep everything offline. So there's no way for anybody to get in and manipulate it. Election results are on transmittable media, just a flash drive. They get run into a computer that never touches the internet. Those flash drives never go into any other computer, just the tabulator and the electionware computer that we have in our office. So we take that kind of thing very seriously. So nobody's ever alone with ballots. Nobody's ever alone with election media. We are just distrustful on purpose of every single thing in every process, to the real detriment of our own convenience most of the time. Sorry, I can't do that until I have another person in the room with me to do that. So we take that part very seriously, and then of course every document we sign has to be locked up, verified, signed by multiple parties. So there's just every step of the process, from the ballot coding to the ballot printing to the distribution of ballots. It's all got electronic timestamps on it. It's all signed off by multiple people, and the security measures we're always thinking of ways we can strengthen those and make sure that they're impeccable as well. So it's a high priority. There's a lot of redundancy and a lot of hands. Nobody's by themselves with it. Everybody is looked over by everybody else. So mostly in a bipartisan way. So that mutual distrust is also very helpful. You can't have two Republicans alone doing something. There has to be a Democrat watching them.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. How can I find out what proposals are on our ballot?
So again, the Michigan Voter Information Center, you can look up your own individual ballot. Our website at the county, gtcountymi.gov/256 is our elections main page, and we have those listed there as well. As soon as the language is officially adopted and accepted, which I think it was finally last week at some point, we got those proposals as they were written up there so that they could be publicly viewed. We're going to publish an election notice in the Record Eagle early October. We statutorily have to do that. And then those things are available on our website and on the state's website as well.
What happens if I use a purple ink pen on an absentee ballot?
Well, it should read. I mean, there's really no reason it wouldn't read unless it was very light, a regular ink pen. It shouldn't make any difference at all. I know there's various conspiracy theories and things going around online telling people to use a blue pen so that they can look up their ballot later and that kind of thing, which sort of violates the spirit of a secret ballot. One of those difficulties we've had is people are like, well, how can I be sure my vote counted, right? And I'm not trying to blow past your question here, but one of the things people try to do is try to come up with a way to verify that their vote counted by doing these kind of little tricks. And we have things by design, so I can't trace anybody's ballot back. It's not my business how you voted. I can tell you that you voted. I can tell you that your vote counted because I saw that we had a signed statement from you. 168 people at your precinct signed that same statement. 168 ballots went in that tabulator, and this is the result. In terms of, can you tell me if I voted for this certain candidate? By design, I cannot, right? So the machines will take an electronic image of the ballot, they'll tabulate it, and those electronic images are all black and white PDFs. We do have to keep the ballots by statute, right? And those will be locked up and sealed for 22 months. But there's no reason to think that it wouldn't count if you used a dark ink pen. But if it didn't count, what they would do in the absentee counting board is they would run it through the machine, and if it rejected it, you would have a bipartisan team replicate the ballot with the proper ink pen. So they would take a blank ballot, you'd have a Democrat and a Republican sit down, read the ballot off to each other, and if they were in agreement, they would mark that box.
So in the precinct itself, if you're voting in person, if the tabulator accepts it, it accepts it, and if it doesn't, it pulls it back out.
Pulls it back.
You have a chance to do something right
You'd
there.
go back to the desk, you'd spoil your ballot, and they'd give you a new one and a good pen, and you would go back and do it again.
And there's a procedure for absentee. Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you. If I receive an absentee ballot in the mail but don't use it, do I just bring it to my polling place on election day?
It'd be more proper to bring it to the clerk and spoil it there, because you are going to screw up the accounting of the polling place. They're going to have one more ballot than they should at the end of the night. You know, they only have 200 ballots, and then the 120 are voted and 80 are unvoted, and all of a sudden they've got 81. It would throw them off a bit. So just take that unvoted ballot back to your township clerk.
Okay. Do I need to have a state-issued picture ID to vote?
Not necessarily. You could use your passport. You can sign an affidavit saying that you have one, and as long as you have one at home, even if you didn't bring it, you can still vote. That affidavit is allowed, and then if you're an enrolled student and have a student ID at a federally supported university or high school, which is basically all of them, you can use that as well. So there's I'm not 100% sure on tribal IDs. That varies by state, but I believe the tribal ID works as well.
Thank you.
It just has to be a federally recognized tribe, which is, I'm not sure where that list lives.
Okay. Is it true that the poll book and tabulator are not connected?
That is true. Yeah, there's no, we used to, prior to 2021, the tabulators would connect back to a secure server, so we would get unofficial election results. I say unofficial because no result is official until the Board of Canvassers meets and certifies the election. But we would get election night results modemed to us through a 3G modem that contained in those tabulators. And they would connect via what they called a zero tunnel back to our secured server. And that was fairly secure system. I mean, it would be on for just the briefest of moments, run through this encrypted server that I'm not sure how anybody could get into. And then we would get back just the election results, which would then be verified by the tapes and by, all the documentation that would come back on election night. We removed those in 2021 because the machines aren't going to be certified by the state Board of Canvassers any longer, so we just proactively removed those before we were told that we had to, because we knew we'd have to eventually. So now everything is totally disconnected. The machine that we write the election programming on is disconnected. We write election media that goes onto a disconnected tabulator, and those results come back. And when we report the results to the state, we just transcribe it on a different computer from a piece of paper. So there's never anything that's touching the internet any longer, even in an encrypted and secured way.
And the electronic poll books also not online?
Not online on election day, nope. We have to download those Monday at 4 o'clock, and that's one of the reasons for the absentee voting. So if you come in and say, I'd like to, register to vote same day, on election day, or at 5 o'clock the day before, you're going to have to cast an absentee ballot because, the e-poll book has been set up already, and that's the election day computer.
Are there two different QVFs, qualified voter files?
There are not. No, there's one.
One
It is the
QVF?
qualified voter file. Yep. There's been some consternation in, conspiratorial chatter. Some folks have used QVF data to set up their own database, but that's not anything that's official. There's just the qualified voter file that is by the State Bureau of Elections and maintained by the clerks in this state.
Are voter records public?
They are, yeah. That's what's one of the interesting things about people talking about hacking voting data sometimes. It's like, if a KGB agent or whatever they call themselves now came in and asked for the voter roll, as long as they filled out the right paperwork, we'd have to give it to them. Most everything is protected. Most everything is publicly available. There's only very few things that are protected: driver's license numbers, social security numbers, and dates of birth. But for the most part, if you ask for a list of every voter in Grand Traverse County, almost everything on there is publicly available. Voter registration lists are available. A lot of candidates and organizations will use them. A lot of groups will use them to mail out absentee ballot applications, which causes people a lot of anxiety sometimes. But yeah, basically anybody who'd like to can make that request.
And just to underscore, the information would be demographic information, but not anything about the ballot.
Nothing about the ballot. I mean, the person's absentee voting status is part of it. So you could see who voted absentee. So if you could pull up, you could get my voter history basically and see when I voted, absentee. You know, some states where you have to register by party, and I'm sorry I keep going back to how some states operate, it's pretty interesting. You can, you know, you have to register as a Democrat or Republican or an independent, and then you have to declare a party for that primary, and you can go back and see what primary the person voted in. In Michigan, that's not publicly available. You can't see which partisan primary somebody voted in. But for the otherwise, you can see if they asked for an absentee ballot, if they cast it, they can get all that information.
Oh, we have a long one here.
My answers are pretty long, so that's only fair.
This is about, again, having paper ballots. Our local election processes seem to involve paper ballots that are normally read and tabulated by optical scanner machines. Is this true across Michigan?
Yes.
And what other methods of reading and tabulating ballots are used in other parts of Michigan? Well,
So it's going to be an optically scanned system pretty much everywhere. You can't do it by hand. That's not really allowed. It's part of the statute now that you have to do it. It's an optical scan machine. There's 3 different systems that have been tested and verified by the state. So there's 3 companies that you can use, and we use something called Election Systems and Software, ES&S. But there's also Hart, InterCivic, and Dominion. And Dominion was the one that was sort of in the news a lot, you know, fighting back and forth with the former president. But, you know, they're basically very similar systems, and it's just a different level, a different software, but security-wise and so forth, they're all fairly similar. And otherwise, there's almost complete precinct uniformity in the state of Michigan. Just, you know, the precinct size can only be so big. It has to be one of 3 systems. There has to be a tabulator and an e-poll book, and you know, the tabulator's optical scan. And the express vote or the, you know, accessibility devices are just marking devices. They're not tabulators. So if you were to be set up with, you know, if you were visually impaired and had to do the touch screen Braille ballot, it would print out a little card and you would read that card through the tabulator. There'd be no data or votes that were in that other machine. So there's pretty good precinct uniformity throughout the state.
and you said that the ballots, the paper ballots are retained for 22 months, is that right? So those are available to be?
Well, electronic records are kept for 22
Oh,
months,
okay.
but yeah, paper ballots are kept a bit longer.
Okay, and so those are available for recount?
Yeah, for the most part, everything has to be recountable. There are rules that, you know, we're past the statutory deadline for a recount for most elections. So, you know, you've only got so long to make that challenge. If somebody wanted to recount those 2020 ballots, they'd need some pretty interesting wranglings in the courts because we're past that recount period. But we go through a routine post-election audit as well. So we're always, we get jurisdictions that are randomly selected, and we have to do a recount of certain races based on whatever algorithm the state uses. We'll get some, you know, security email, and they'll say, okay, you go to Garfield Township 5, Traverse City Precinct 7, Fife Lake, or whatever it might be, and we'll have to go through a hand recount post-election. And that's always publicly posted, and people are welcome to come and watch and observe the process if they're, you know, have that level of interest. Happy to accommodate as long as they don't try to touch anything.
Is there really no appeal of a challenged voter, even if they lie about their affirmation?
You can challenge somebody's voter registration as well. You know, there's that process. You can submit that challenge. But no, there's not. It's not meant to be a strenuous back and forth in the precinct on election day. Folks have a right to vote. You know, the clerks do their best to maintain the voter rolls. At a certain point, people have an attestment that they have to sign. You know, basically, when you sign off on that application, your vote, you're saying, this is my name, this is my address, and, you know, the burden's on you to make that case. But there's not meant to be a strenuous challenge process in the precinct on election day, because that can impede the voting process for other people. It takes inspectors, it takes personnel away, and that causes lines and problems and things like that. So by design, it's not, I don't believe, supposed to be very strenuous.
Thank you. My divorce was recently finalized, and I legally changed my name to my maiden name. I have not yet had time to change my name on my driver's license. What name do I give when I vote?
It's a great question. You can, you can still give your prior name, and you can update your voter registration there in the precinct on election day so that you can have that change going forward. But you still are who you are, so you're still legally entitled to vote.
Okay, and a similar question is about my driver's license has my first, middle, and last name, but the voter file has my first and last name only. How do I apply to vote?
Generally speaking, it's going to find, I mean, you're going to be found. It's not going to be that difficult. Your voter registration application that you filled out will have your name, and that's what's going to be in the e-poll book. But if you're able to also, when you go to the Secretary of State, make that change on your voter registration as well, if you so choose. In the event that you don't, they're going to try to make sure that they found you correctly by your name, your residency, and if they need to, your date of birth. They might ask you for your date of birth to just help verify that they've attached the correct voter with the correct voter record. So keep your voter registration up to date is the best course of action if you can. Prior to the election, it's always nice makes things go smoother, makes the lines stay shorter, makes the whole process easier. But if for some reason you don't, you're going to be able to vote. You're not going to get turned away. If they can't locate your voter record, statutorily, you have a right to a provisional ballot where you can go in and cast a provisional ballot or an envelope ballot that will be held until the canvassers convene, and then you can come to the clerk and provide answers to any questions, and then your vote could be counted after the fact, added into the totals. But for the most part, they're going to be able to find you as long as you are who you say you are and you're registered to vote.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Here's a yes or no response.
Whew, that's
Must I
tough for me.
request? Must I request an absentee ballot for each election?
Yeah, unless you have a disability or you're overseas, for the most part, yes. There are some exceptions for primary and general election. But right now, and that's one of the proposals that are up in the state, a permanent absentee list where you would be able to get an absentee ballot without having to request it. A lot of clerks maintain a list where they'll send you a absentee voter application every election. But in terms of making that request, you will have to do that election by election.
Thank you. What age or reason qualifies me to request an absentee ballot?
As of 2018, you don't need one. No excuse absentee is perfectly legal in Michigan. That was short. I got that one short. I'm doing better.
How easily can someone vote in more than one state? Do the states communicate with each other?
Most states communicate. Not every state communicates with every state, though, unfortunately. In Michigan and the United States, we do have, it's a federalist system, so there's going to be, like some states have a Department of Motor Vehicles that maintains everything. Some states it's maintained by the county, some locally. So you will see those anomalies. The thing I would say, though, is if you vote more than once, you're doing it under your own name, you're just providing evidence of a felony. It will be found. I mean, there's a chance you might be able to get it tabulated if you vote, but there's a much greater chance that you're going to be prosecuted and that you'll have committed a felony because you have to do that under your own name. So the cost-benefit analysis is very low for doing something like that.
Are ballots without proof of identification counted right away or set aside?
No, unless the person refused to fill out the affidavit. So they could say the affidavit, like, I'm not in possession of my ID, but I have an ID. They can fill that out, and their ballot goes into the tabulator. If they say, I don't have an ID, and I'm not showing it, and you can't make me and that kind of thing, then they can have a provisional ballot, but that's not going to be counted right away.
That won't be counted until you bring in proof?
Until they would bring in their ID or come
They
back
have
and
to come
sign
in.
the affidavit.
Okay. And can you define what is an affidavit?
So it's basically an attestment that you sign saying, I do have a valid ID. I'm not in possession of it today, and you sign it you put your signature on it, you use that in lieu of an ID, give that to the precinct inspector, and then you're able to vote a regular ballot. As of now. Legislatively, they could always change that, but that's what we're dealing with going into November.
Does Michigan automatically register me to vote when I get my driver's license?
Not unless you request it. You can request to register to vote when you get your driver's license, but They don't do it for you automatically.
Thank you. What happens when the polls close? How is my vote counted, and how does it reach each township? How does it reach the township, city, or county clerk?
Oh, man. So this is a big one. So we could do a whole thing on just this, right? There's a flurry of activity that goes on after the fact. But there's a reconciliation process. So they will tabulate. They will make sure that they've gotten, that the number of applications to vote matches the numbers on the tabulator. If they're off by any means, they have to try to investigate and figure out why that might be. You know, they issued 139 ballots, only 138 are in the tabulator. What happened? Well, they have to look back in their notes. Maybe somebody took one and left with it. Maybe somebody, you know, exposed their ballot and they had to take it and spoil it. You know, that kind of thing. So once they've got the numbers that have matched and everybody signs off on everything, they bring a printed copy of the poll book. They bring a report for any incidents that might come, some various other reports that they're required to issue if there's any provisional ballots, et cetera, and account for every single ballot. They put those in different envelopes, make sure that everything is signed, make sure the tape is signed. They extract the election media and put that in a secured sleeve and put a signature and a seal on that. And then that stuff all gets brought back to the county clerk's office and reconciled in the presence of the clerk and the probate judge and a couple other staff members as well. Then all that stuff is verified that it came back and they get to go home. I take the election media and put it into a computer that's never been on the internet, ever, and tabulate those results. They'll take those tabulated results and read them into our ElectionWare software. And then I put those on another flash drive that's been cleaned and never been in another computer, put that into our computer that is hooked to the internet or hooked to our county server, which is fairly secure, and we put those results online for the public to view. But that's only the unofficial results. Everything else gets put again under another level of secured seal and then taken up and opened again in the presence of the bipartisan board of canvassers who are going to review everything, look over it, make sure it was done correctly, call in any precinct officials or township officials or city officials that they need to question and make sure that they can reconcile the election the week after before we actually have an official result. So there's a lot of people that have to be, that are all accountable for those results once they get to us. It's kind of it's a whole to-do, I guess would be a short way of putting it.
So when do the county canvassers meet?
They'll usually meet the election. We've done it on a Wednesday, but for the most part, Thursday at noon they convene, and we publicly post it, and people are able to come and be an observer for that process as well if they'd like to. But we run a few reports for them, get the room set up, try to get 4 or 5 hours of sleep, and then we're back at it to try to get that whole thing done. So we're usually, I think the last two, August and November of 2020, we both left as people were coming in the building. So it's about a 24-hour day before we get all that stuff back, secured, signed off, before we can let everybody go home. So there's an awful lot to do behind the scenes.
Thank you.
That's why I don't want to hand tally any votes at that point, because I'm starting to see images that aren't there, you know.
Do we have drop boxes in Grand Traverse County?
We don't have any county-run drop boxes, but pretty much every township has a drop box. And those they have to report the official drop box locations in the qualified voter file, and then you can look those up at the Michigan Voter Information Center. So they have to maintain those. They have to limit who has access to those. And I believe all of our jurisdictions have a drop box at this point.
Okay. And do you know of any instances of tampering with drop boxes?
No. As far as I'm aware, everything in 2020 that they said was perfectly fine. They maintain the drop boxes. There's no statutory requirement to have a drop box. There's no statutory requirement that it be under camera or anything like that, or that the footage has to be kept in any way. So nobody reported any problems with it. It was just a matter of some people didn't have the infrastructure existing in 2020. They had to secure and buy a drop box in advance of that election. That was really the only drama we had here in this county. Of course, people are always interested in those, and there's been a great many people who've been interested in recent months and things is that, like I said earlier, that documentary came out. But to my knowledge, nobody reported any difficulties with it.
And are they required to be, the ballots in the boxes required to be picked up daily, or?
No, they should be. Obviously, it's a best practice. Generally, the clerks will do that because they're going to they're going to log those in when they receive them. So they stop getting phone calls of people asking, has my ballot come in yet, when they do that. So they'll usually go out and check the drop box every few hours. But usually you want to do that in the presence of multiple people. So sometimes the clerks will do that when they can have 2 people go out there.
What is the, this is a technical question, what is the Michigan State Secretary of State online address for the voter information?
It's the MVIC. It is, I believe it is michigan.gov/sos/MVIC. But I get lost after a few backslashes. So we do have it linked up on our website as well, if you go to the county clerk's page.
And look for the Voter Information
Yep.
Center.
And there's, it's required on posters that everybody's got to be putting up here as well, too.
Okay. A long one here, again, about absentee ballots.
Okay.
Why does Grand Traverse County not tally the number of votes not counted on returned absentee ballots, especially on primary elections where the entire ballot can be spoiled if 2 party names are marked?
Yeah, I don't know that we don't tally it. It's just that we don't have an easy-to-generate report. So there's not a separate category that we can program in, basically saying, this race didn't count because the person overvoted. It would just be overvotes. And we do tally overvotes, but those don't appear on a nice report. So we don't spend a lot of time post-election creating reports. We have an election software that we've purchased, and we use those reports to inform the Board of Canvassers, and they look at those in the cast votes record. But if we don't have a utility for it to canvass the actual election, we don't spend a good deal of time creating reports for just that purpose. Pardon me, but you can use those existing data to sort of compile that if that's something you're really interested in by tabulating overvotes.
Okay. And the same questioner said in-person votes are flagged and a voter can get a new ballot
That's right.
in a primary, but if you cross parties in a primary,
No, there's no way, there's no real remediation for that if the person's not there. So if you make a mistake, if you overvote a ballot, you vote 2 people in a race for only 1 or 3 in a race for 2, or you vote for a Democrat and a Republican in the same race, or on the same partisan section, a primary ballot, the machine is going to kick it back to you with an error message. If you're not going to be there in that absentee counting board to see that, so you're sort of on your own when it comes to that absentee counting board, unfortunately. One of the pitfalls of voting absentee, I suppose.
have you had any threats, or do you know of threats to local voting officials or poll workers in Northwest Michigan?
No, anecdotally, just from speaking to Cheryl Guy in Antrim County, I know they had some difficult nights over there and felt a little unsafe at times. No one's ever been very directly threatening to me. We've dealt with groups feel very passionately about some things that, regarding election security, if I can be generous, and they've not been threatening in any way. They're just, passionate and interested in what they're interested in, and I don't share their passion on that particular subject, the way they interpret it, that is. But no, we've not been threatened. It's very fortunate in this community to be able to have people who disagree but are still relatively civil. So, but I do know it happens, and it's happened a lot of places, and it's not always reported, but we have seen it, and it's unfortunate, especially in the polling place when it's just a lot of really good community-minded people of both parties coming together to do kind of a hard and thankless job. You hate to see anybody treated that way,
Right. We've got dozens more questions here, but I'm going to try to lump some together just to cover some more topics.
I can try to be brief, too. I'm probably not helping. I know
Okay, briefly, write-in candidates. If I write in Mickey Mouse.
don't. Please don't.
Okay,
No, you have to be a qualified write-in in Michigan to appear, to have your vote considered. So if
What
you
does that
wanted to
mean?
run as a write-in, you'd have, I believe, the second Friday prior to the election, you have to file a write-in intent with the proper, so if countywide, for instance, a county commission, you'd have to get it to the county clerk. Township races, you'd have to get it to the township or the city, et cetera, to be a qualified write-in. Everybody else, it counts as a write-in, but we're not tallying the write-in for Mickey Mouse to say Mickey Mouse got 6 votes and then we can all laugh. It's not going to happen. So it just it's an irritant to me. But, so I'd appreciate if people just didn't do it.
okay. I've got a couple more here, but
Sure.
while I go through these, are there any serious, important questions that you're dying to answer that I haven't asked?
No, I mean, I feel it kind of refreshing not to have to talk about election security retroactive to 2020 all the time. So a lot of the last few months has been a lot of me trying to explain to people how the process works and how a thermostat didn't change our votes and things like that. So I'm happy to answer any informational questions. I would hope that people are assured at least that we take security seriously, cybersecurity and physical security. And we're always trying to do better, and no system is perfect, and we wouldn't say that it is, but I would just like to impart on everyone that that's something we think about always. We don't want to see any holes in our security, and we, do anything we can to shore that up if we ever see anything that needs shoring up. So.
Okay. And what happens if I leave a race or a ballot issue blank? Do I have to vote every single race?
Nope, that's your right. You could come in and just cast a blank ballot if you want. You don't have to vote for anything that you don't feel that you want to vote for. In fact, if you've seen the size of this ballot, I don't know how people are going to get through. Most people haven't read that much in a year, is what's on the back of that ballot for all of our proposals here in Grand Traverse County. So I imagine we'll see a few blanks.
Okay. What sort of election workers and volunteers are needed the most and where?
Right now, I don't know that we have a huge need countywide. I know that some jurisdictions have needs develop as we go. So election inspectors are like any other group of people. Some get sick and some have to go and have family emergencies or health issues as they get closer to an election. So we always like to build a reserve pool. So I would just encourage anyone who's interested to contact their local township and see if they can get on a list. And, we might not have a need in where you live, but there might be a need somewhere else where you might fill it. So get on the list and take the training and make yourself available. And then when the need arises, you'll definitely get called.
Okay. In 20 words or less, can you tell us what issues ballot proposals will be on the Grand Traverse County?
The county has several millage proposals. I know we have Veterans Affairs, Senior Center, and Animal Control. All of them want money. And then we have 3 state proposals that are on the ballot as well. Abortion rights, kind of a reconfiguration of term limits, and then some very interesting changes to election law that people will have to give some thought to. And then I know we have an authority for beta, several school proposals, and the intermediate school district. A lot of people want some money, so
Okay.
you calculate those mills as you go. I don't know.
Well, thank you so much, Sam.
Yeah, my pleasure.
This has been very informative. I've learned a lot myself, and I'm sure that the audience, I think we got to almost everybody's question here. And now we are going to take just a couple of moments. We do have an audience member, Bill Clark, I believe is here, from Beta, who knows about this ballot proposal and is just going to give us some basic information about the requests that will be on the ballot. So, Bill, if you just want to take a moment or two.
So, well, first of all, thank you to the League of Women Voters and Sam for all the amazing information about voting and the intricacies, and they do a fantastic job from that perspective. So I'm Eric Lingard, the Director of Communications and Development for Beta, and this is Bill Clark, our Mobility and Outreach Coordinator, and we are one of the ballot initiatives that are going to be on the ballot here on November 8th. So Bay Area Transportation Authority, we're on the ballot for both Grand Traverse and Leelanau County because we serve both of those areas as a two-county authority. So we cover 900 square miles of land, provide over 1,000 rides a day. We're averaging about 400,000 rides a year, almost as close as what the airport brings in to our community. So what will that look like here on November 8th? So Beta is asking for a renewal of its current operating rate, and it's actually a renewal at a lower rate. So it's 0.4788 mils, average about $50 for the year per $100,000 in the community, and that's just for the ongoing and continued operations of Beta and our transportation services. So those are for our door-to-door services, our fixed routes, all the community transportation that we provide for folks, so including folks with disabilities and seniors. About 170,000 rides a year go towards that. And so there's just a lot going on in the community. Of course, COVID helped kind of reset what public transit looks like, and we're kind of building back and increasing ridership from that perspective, and there's a lot of positive happening as well. One of the things that you might have seen in the news as well is that a new operations center is being built on the corner of Lafreniere and Hammond Roads with workforce housing that's connected to it as well. So it's one of the first transit-oriented projects in the state and in our region that has both housing and public transit combined together, so that people can, if they don't have a vehicle, or if there's maybe a single car family, they'll be right next to each other and they'll be able to utilize that kind of stuff. So just wanted to share that we will be on the ballot on November 8th with a litany of the other initiatives that will be on there, and happy to answer any questions or if anything I left out, Bill. Okay. Well, thank you for your time. We brought some information about what that's like, both at the front and here at one of the side tables. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Cheryl?
Well, thank you so much to everyone who attended and asked questions. Thank you to Sam and Ted and Jane for asking questions. And Sam, thank you very much. It was very, very helpful. And thank you to Aaron Olson from the library and Joe Torrance from Traverse Area Community Media. We have a lot of information on the table out the door about ballot proposals, we have some really great pamphlets, Know Your Rights, that really answers a lot of questions. So feel free to pick those up. In addition, one of our league members has a little overflow of tomatoes and squash, so feel free to help yourself to those also. Our October 18th program will discuss the statewide proposals, the three proposals: transparency and term limits, promote the vote 2022, and also reproductive rights for all. Margaret Goldman, who is a League of Women Voters member and a member of the League of Women Voters Michigan Speakers team, will be our speaker. And the November program is going to focus on who is a canvasser and what do they do. The time and date will be announced because on the date of our regularly scheduled program, our speaker will be busy canvassing. So we've had to change that time and date. Again, thank you all for attending, and you do have evaluation forms on your chair. If you would fill those out, that would be greatly appreciated. And thank you again so much for attending. We hope to see you in October, same place. Thank you.